when a 12-year-old girl ran screaming toward a group of bikers in full leather at a highway rest stop yelling, "Wait, something's wrong." Nobody expected what they'd find in her family's RV would make even the toughest riders cry. But that's exactly what happened on a scorching July afternoon at the Sunset Rest area off Interstate 40, just outside Amarillo, Texas, when Mia Rodriguez made the most desperate decision of her young life. Jake Wilson was pouring coffee from his thermos when he heard the scream. He'd been a Marine for 12 years before trading his uniform for leather, and that scream, high-pitched, terrified, and absolutely genuine, triggered every protective instinct he'd developed in both lives. He turned to see a girl, maybe 12 or 13, sprinting across the parking lot toward their group of motorcycles. Her dark hair flew behind her, her face was flushed red from exertion and heat, and her eyes were wild with panic. "Wait, something's wrong!" she screamed again, nearly stumbling as she reached them. "Please, you have to help. Something's really wrong." Jake's riding partner, Tommy Hammer Jackson, instinctively stepped forward, his massive frame creating a protective barrier. The other 4 members of their group, all Iron Riders from the Amarillo chapter, immediately went on alert. They'd stopped for a routine break during their ride back from a charity event in Oklahoma City. Now this kid was having some kind of crisis. "Whoa, slow down," Jake said, kneeling to get eye level with her. His voice was calm, despite the adrenaline spiking through his system. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" The girl, Mia, though Jake didn't know her name yet, was breathing so hard she could barely speak. Sweat poured down her face, and she kept glancing frantically back at a large white RV parked about 50 yards away. "The twins," she gasped. "Emma and Lucas. They locked them in the bottom compartment. It's so hot. They've been in there for over an hour. I tried to get them out, but the lock, I can't. I need help." Jake's blood ran cold. Bottom compartment. In this heat. He glanced at the temperature display on the rest stop's digital sign, 103 degrees. Inside an enclosed space under a vehicle, it could easily be 130 or more. "Show me," he said, already moving. "Wait." The girl grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in with surprising strength. "My foster parents, Brian and Kelsey, they'll stop you. They always stop everyone. They'll say I'm lying. They'll say I have behavioral problems. Please, you have to believe me." Jake looked into her eyes and saw something he recognized from his military days, the look of someone who'd been trying to sound an alarm that nobody would hear. The look of someone who'd been failed by every system meant to protect them. "I believe you," he said simply. "Hammer, call 911. Tell them possible child endangerment, kids trapped in a vehicle in extreme heat. Rest of you, come with me." As they moved toward the RV, Jake took in details. The vehicle was expensive, a Winnebago that probably cost close to $200,000. It was clean, well-maintained, with cheerful decals on the side, a small American flag sticker, a Christian fish symbol. Everything about it screamed normal, wholesome family. Mia ran ahead, dropping to her knees beside the RV's undercarriage. "Here," she said, pointing to a storage compartment with a padlock hanging from the latch. "They're in here. Emma, Lucas, can you hear me? Help is coming." Jake pressed his ear against the compartment door. For a terrifying moment, he heard nothing. Then, so faint he almost missed it, a weak whimper. His stomach turned over. "Get bolt cutters from my saddlebag," he barked at Tommy. "Now." That's when a man emerged from the rest stop building. Mid-40s, average height, wearing khaki shorts and a polo shirt. He had the kind of face that belonged in a church directory, friendly, trustworthy, forgettable. When he saw Mia with the bikers, his expression transformed from pleasant to furious in a heartbeat. "Mia, get over here right now!" His voice carried across the parking lot, sharp with authority. Behind him, a woman appeared, blonde, athletic, with a yoga mat bag over her shoulder. She looked confused, then angry. "Sir, we need you to open this compartment," Jake said, keeping his voice level. "There are children inside." Brian Thompson's face arranged itself into an expression of bewildered concern. "Children? In the storage compartment? That's ridiculous. Mia, what lies have you been telling these people?" "I'm not lying," Mia's voice cracked. "Emma and Lucas are in there. You locked them in there because Lucas spilled juice on your laptop." "This is absurd," Brian pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. This is harassment. Mia has serious behavioral issues. She's been in 3 foster homes before us because she makes up stories for attention." Kelsey Thompson moved forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Mia, honey, this is why we have to keep taking you to therapy. These fantasies, these accusations, they're not healthy." Jake watched Mia's face crumble. He'd seen this before, too. The way authorities and abusers could make victims doubt their own reality. But he also heard it again, that weak sound from inside the compartment. And this time, he heard something else. A desperate, barely audible banging. "Tommy," Jake said quietly, "how long until police arrive?" Dispatcher said 8 minutes. Jake made a decision. "Cut the lock." "You can't do that." Brian stepped forward, his pleasant mask slipping further. "That's destruction of property. I'll have you arrested." "So have me arrested." Jake met his eyes with a look that made Brian stop in his tracks. "But those kids are coming out. Now." Tommy appeared with bolt cutters. The lock was cheap, designed more for show than security. It snapped with barely any pressure. Jake pulled open the compartment door, and the wave of heat that rolled out made him physically recoil. It was like opening an oven. Inside the cramped space, 2 small children were curled together. A boy and a girl, maybe 6 years old, with matching blonde hair and matching expressions of dazed confusion. Their faces were bright red, their lips cracked, their clothing soaked with sweat. The girl, Emma, was barely conscious. The boy, Lucas, was the one who'd been weakly banging on the compartment wall. "Oh my God," Tommy whispered. Jake reached in and carefully lifted Emma out. Her skin was burning to the touch. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Behind him, another biker, a woman named Sarah Smoke Williams, was already calling for emergency services again, her voice urgent. "We need an ambulance at Sunset Rest Area, Interstate 40 East. 2 children, severe heat exposure, possibly heat stroke. They're conscious but barely responsive." Brian and Kelsey's expressions had changed. The masks were completely gone now. What Jake saw was cold calculation. Brian immediately switched tactics. "Oh my God, how did they get in there?" His voice was filled with manufactured horror. "They must have been playing hide and seek. We told them not to play in the storage areas. Kelsey, why weren't you watching them?" It was a smooth pivot. Jake had to give them credit for that. Within seconds, they'd transformed from angry at being questioned to concerned parents horrified by an accident, but Mia wasn't having it. "You locked them in there," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "You did it on purpose, just like you locked me in the bathroom for 6 hours last week, just like you make us skip meals if we make mistakes, just like you took away Emma's stuffed animal and burned it in front of her because she wet the bed." "Mia, please." Kelsey's voice was gentle, therapeutic. "We know you're struggling with attachment issues. This fantasy world you create, it's a coping mechanism. But you're going to get us all in trouble with these stories." Jake carefully laid Emma on the ground in the shade of the RV. Lucas was clinging to Mia now, sobbing into her shirt. Other travelers in the rest stop had started gathering, phones out, filming. Jake noticed that and filed it away. Good. Let them record everything. Smoke brought water bottles and carefully helped Emma take tiny sips. The little girl's eyes fluttered open, and the first word out of her cracked lips was, "Mia." "I'm here," Mia sobbed. "I got help. You're going to be okay." "We were so hot," Emma whispered. "I thought we were going to die." The Thompsons heard that. Jake saw Kelsey's jaw tighten. "She's confused," Kelsey said quickly. "Heat can cause disorientation. They probably climbed in there themselves and couldn't get out." "The compartment was padlocked from the outside," Jake said flatly. "Kids can't lock themselves in from inside. We lock all." "Our storage," Brian snapped. "It's standard security for an RV this expensive. They must have closed themselves in before we locked it." The sound of sirens cut through the tension. Within minutes, the rest stop was flooded with emergency vehicles. 2 ambulances, 3 police cars, and a fire truck. Paramedics immediately went to work on Emma and Lucas, checking vitals, starting IVs, preparing to transport. Jake gave his statement to an officer named Rodriguez, explaining exactly what happened. Mia gave her statement, her voice shaking but determined. The Thompsons gave their statement, presenting themselves as devoted foster parents, dealing with a tragic accident and a troubled teen's false accusations. The officer looked exhausted. This is going to require a full investigation. Child Protective Services will need to be involved. They already are involved, Mia said bitterly. I called them twice. They said the Thompsons passed all their home inspections and that I needed to stop making up stories. Officer Rodriguez's expression shifted. You've reported concerns before? 5 times, to 3 different social workers. Nobody believes me because Brian and Kelsey are so good at pretending to be perfect. Jake watched the officer process this. He could see the man wanting to believe Mia, but also seeing a seemingly normal couple, an expensive RV, and a situation that could be explained as a horrible accident. Look, Brian said, his voice reasonable. We love these kids, all 3 of them. But Mia has been through trauma. Her biological parents were addicts. She has trust issues. We've been trying to help her, but she fights us constantly. This accusation, it's heartbreaking, but it's not true. Then why did she run to us instead of you when she realized the twins were in danger? Jake asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Brian didn't have a good answer for that. The paramedics were loading Emma and Lucas into the ambulance. Both children were more alert now, responding to treatment, but still clearly suffering from heat exhaustion. A female paramedic approached Officer Rodriguez. Those kids have bruises, she said quietly. Multiple stages of healing, different ages, and the girl has what looks like restraint marks on her wrists. Everything stopped. Brian immediately spoke up. Foster kids often come to us with injuries from their previous situations. We document everything. We have records. We'll need to see those records, Officer Rodriguez said, his tone shifting from tired to suspicious. And I'm placing a temporary hold on the children pending investigation. You can't do that, Kelsey protested. We have legal custody. I can, and I am. Those kids are going to the hospital and then into emergency protective custody until we sort this out. Mia started crying in relief. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. You did good, kid. You saved them. As the ambulances pulled away, lights flashing, Jake watched the Thompsons. They were arguing quietly with each other, their body language tense and angry. The mask had fully slipped now. These weren't concerned parents. These were people furious that their control had been challenged. Jake pulled out his phone and made a call. Steele? It's Jake. I need you to get the club together. We've got a situation here in Amarillo. 3 foster kids, abuse case, and I've got a bad feeling these people are going to try to slip through the cracks. He paused, watching Mia wipe her tears. No, this one's not going away quietly. We're making sure of it. Because Jake Wilson had learned something in his 12 years as a Marine and his 8 years as an Iron Rider. Sometimes the system failed. Sometimes good people were too busy or too overwhelmed to see what was happening right in front of them. But the Iron Riders had time, they had resources, and they had something else. They had a complete intolerance for people who hurt kids. The hospital waiting room at Amarillo Memorial felt too small for the tension it held. Jake sat with Mia, who hadn't stopped shaking since the ambulances left the rest stop. Across from them, a social worker named Patricia Harris reviewed documents on her tablet, her expression growing darker with each page she scrolled through. Officer Rodriguez leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the Thompsons who sat in the far corner whispering urgently to each other. Mia, Patricia said gently, looking up from her screen. I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? Mia nodded, her hands twisting in her lap. Jake noticed the bruises on her arms more clearly now under the fluorescent lights. They weren't the normal bruises kids got from playing. These were finger-shaped, grip marks. How long have you been with the Thompsons? 7 months, since December. And when did the problem start? Mia laughed bitterly. The first day, but they're smart about it. They wait until after the home visits. They wait until everyone thinks everything's perfect. Patricia made notes. What kind of problems are we talking about? Jake watched Mia's face as she struggled with how much to say. He'd seen that look before on faces much older than 12. The look of someone who'd been told they were lying so many times they started doubting their own memories. They lock us in rooms for punishment, Mia said quietly. Sometimes for hours. Emma wet the bed once and they made her stand in the corner for 6 hours without food or water. Lucas is scared of the dark, so they lock him in the storage compartment, not the one from today, a different one, smaller, as punishment when he cries. They take away our meals if we make mistakes. They destroyed Emma's stuffed bunny because she wouldn't stop crying for it one night. That's a complete fabrication, Brian said loudly from across the room. This child has been coached, probably by her biological parents who were trying to get her back. Her biological parents are both deceased, Patricia said without looking at him. Drug overdose 3 years ago. Brian's mouth snapped shut. Kelsey picked up the thread. Then she's doing this for attention. We've given her everything. A stable home, good food, her own room. And this is how she repays us? With lies? Patricia ignored them and continued with Mia. Have you tried to report this before? 5 times. I called the hotline twice. I told my school counselor at our last school in Arkansas. I told a social worker who came for a home visit in Oklahoma. I told a police officer when we stopped in New Mexico and I saw him at a gas station. Mia's voice broke. Nobody believed me. The Thompsons always have perfect answers. They show people our rooms and they're nice. They show them the food in the fridge. They have all these papers documenting my behavioral problems from previous foster homes. What behavioral problems? Jake asked. Running away, lying, aggression toward adults. Except I never did any of those things. They made it all up. Mia looked at Patricia with desperate eyes. They've been doing this for years. We're not the first kids. When we got placed with them, there was another girl, Maya. She was 14. She told me the same things were happening to her, but she stopped reporting it because nobody believed her either. Then one day she was just gone. They said she'd been moved to another home because of behavioral issues. Patricia's pen stopped moving. Do you remember Maya's last name? Foster. Maya Foster. She was from Dallas originally. Patricia made a note and Jake saw Officer Rodriguez pull out his own phone, typing quickly. A doctor emerged from the emergency room, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes. The twins are stable. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, but they'll recover. We're keeping them overnight for observation. Can we see them? Brian stood up immediately. Actually, I need to speak with Officer Rodriguez first. The doctor's tone was professionally neutral, but Jake caught the edge in it. Privately. They stepped into a consultation room. Through the small window, Jake watched Rodriguez's expression change from concerned to furious. When they emerged 5 minutes later, the officer's jaw was set like granite. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'm placing you under arrest for child endangerment. The waiting room erupted. Brian shot to his feet. This is insane. You can't arrest us for an accident. The children have injuries consistent with ongoing abuse, Officer Rodriguez said flatly. Multiple bruises in various stages of healing, restraint marks, signs of malnutrition despite your claims of providing adequate care. The twins also told the doctor that they have been locked in that compartment as punishment before, multiple times. They're children, Kelsey shrieked. They're confused. They don't understand what they're saying. 6-year-olds know the difference between an accident and being locked in a box as punishment. The officer pulled out handcuffs. Turn around. What happened next burned itself into Jake's memory. Brian Thompson's mask didn't just slip. It shattered completely. His face twisted with rage, and he lunged not at the officer but at Mia. You little bitch, he snarled. After everything we did for you, you're going to ruin everything. Jake moved on instinct, putting himself between Brian and Mia. Tommy, who'd stayed with Jake, appeared at his side. Brian pulled up short, suddenly facing 2 large bikers instead of a 12-year-old girl. Touch her, and it'll be the last thing you do, Jake said quietly. Brian's hands were shaking with fury. You don't understand. These kids are nothing, damaged goods. Nobody wants them. We were doing them a favor giving them a home. A favor? Mia's voice was small, but it cut through the room like a knife. You collected $5,000 a month for all 3 of us. That's $15,000. For 7 months. You've made over $100,000 off us, and you barely feed us. You lock us in rooms and compartments. You tell us we're worthless, that nobody will ever want us, that we should be grateful you don't send us back to the system. The numbers hung in the air. Jake did quick math. If they'd been fostering for years like Mia suggested, with multiple kids at a time, the money added up fast. Officer Rodriguez was on his radio now. I need backup at Amarillo Memorial, main waiting room. We've got a situation. Kelsey tried a different approach, her voice breaking with manufactured tears. Please, you have to understand. These children are so difficult. Mia runs away. The twins are destructive. We've tried everything. Sometimes you have to use firm discipline. It's for their own good. Locking 6-year-olds in a storage compartment in 100-degree heat is not discipline, Patricia said, her voice cold. It's torture, and it's going to end today. Brian was breathing hard, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. You can't prove anything. It's our word against hers. A troubled foster kid with a history of lying versus 2 upstanding citizens with perfect backgrounds. Actually, Officer Rodriguez said, pulling out his phone, there's security footage from the rest stop. It shows you and your wife entering the building, then Mia running to the bikers 3 minutes later. The RV never moved. Nobody else approached it, which means you locked those kids in there before you went inside. Brian's face went white. There's also this. Patricia held up her tablet. I just got off the phone with Child Protective Services in Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona. The Thompsons have had 17 foster children placed with them over the past 8 years. Guess how many of those placements ended with the children being moved for behavioral problems? All of them, Mia whispered. 16 out of 17, Patricia corrected. The 17th was Maya Foster, who wasn't moved for behavioral problems. She ran away and was never found. The room went silent. Jake felt ice forming in his stomach. We filed a missing person report, Kelsey said quickly. We did everything right. It wasn't our fault she ran. A 14-year-old girl with no money, no phone, no resources, runs away and vanishes without a trace? Patricia's voice was sharp. And you didn't think that was suspicious? Kids run away all the time from foster care, Brian snapped. It's not our responsibility to... He stopped, realizing what he'd just admitted, that they didn't care, that these children were just income sources. Officer Rodriguez's backup arrived. 2 more officers, a man and a woman, entered the waiting room. We're also executing a search warrant on your RV, Rodriguez said. Financial Crimes Division wants to look at your records. You can't do that without... Judge Murphy signed the warrant 20 minutes ago. Rodriguez handed Brian a document. She was very interested in your foster care history once I explained the situation. As the officers moved to arrest both Thompsons, Kelsey made one last desperate play. Mia, honey, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. We love you. We were trying to help you. Don't you remember all the good times, the trips we took, the toys we bought you? Mia looked at her with eyes that seemed far too old for 12. You bought those things for the social workers to see during home visits. Then you'd take them away after they left and tell us we didn't deserve nice things. The handcuffs clicked into place on both Thompsons. As they were led away, Brian turned back one last time. You'll regret this. All of you. Those kids will end up back in the system, bouncing from home to home until they age out with nothing. At least with us, they had stability. They had a prison, Jake said quietly. There's a difference. After the Thompsons were gone, Mia collapsed into a chair and started sobbing. Not the quiet, controlled crying of someone used to hiding their emotions. This was the raw, gasping sobs of someone who'd been holding everything together for months and could finally break. Patricia sat beside her, not touching, just present. Jake stood nearby, feeling helpless in the face of this kid's pain. What happens now? Mia finally asked when she could speak. Now we make sure you and the twins are safe, Patricia said. You'll be placed in emergency foster care while we investigate. Separately for now, until we can find a placement that can take all 3 of you. No! Mia's head snapped up. You can't separate us. Emma and Lucas need me. I'm the only one who can calm them down when they have nightmares. I'm the only one they trust. Mia, I understand, but finding a foster home that can take 3 children on short notice, then they stay with me. The voice came from Jake. Everyone turned to look at him. He was as surprised as anyone by what he'd just said, but he kept going. My wife and I, we're licensed emergency foster parents, have been for 3 years. We can take all 3 of them tonight. It was true. Jake and his wife Rachel had gotten licensed after his niece entered foster care during her mother's addiction crisis. They'd wanted to be able to help if needed. They'd never actually had a placement, but the license was active. Patricia looked skeptical. Mr. Wilson, that's generous, But this is a complicated case. These children have experienced significant trauma. They need specialized care. My wife is a trauma therapist, Jake said. She works specifically with kids who've been through abuse. We have the space, we have the resources, and more importantly, we have time. He looked at Mia. How old are you? 12. When I was 12, my dad walked out on us. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I know what it feels like when adults fail you, when the system fails you. I'm not going to let that happen to you 3. Mia stared at him with an expression caught between hope and disbelief. Why would you do this? You don't even know us. Because you ran to me for help. That means something. Jake pulled out his phone. Let me call my wife. If she agrees and if Patricia approves it, you 3 stay together tonight. Tomorrow we figure out the next step. Deal? Mia nodded, not trusting her voice. Jake stepped away to make the call. Rachel answered on the second ring. Hey, how was the ride? Complicated, Jake said. Rachel, I need to ask you something and I need you to really think about it before answering. He explained everything. The rest stop, the twins, Mia, the Thompsons, the situation. When he finished, there was a long silence. Bring them home, Rachel finally said. All 3 of them. I'll get the rooms ready. Jake felt something loosen in his chest. I love you. I know. Now, bring those kids home before I change my mind and realize we're completely insane. By midnight, after hours of paperwork, medical examinations, and bureaucratic hurdles, Jake loaded 3 children into his truck. Emma and Lucas, freshly released from the hospital, climbed into the back seat. Mia sat in front, staring out the window at the dark Texas night. Are we really staying with you? Emma asked quietly. For tonight, definitely, Jake said. Maybe longer if you want to. What if you're like them? Lucas whispered. What if you pretend to be nice and then you're mean? Jake glanced in the rearview mirror at the 6-year-old boy with the haunted eyes. That's fair. You don't know me. You don't have any reason to trust me. So here's what we're going to do. When we get to my house, I'm going to show you where everything is. The food, the doors, the phone. If at any point you feel unsafe, you can call 911. Or you can call Patricia, she gave you her card. Or you can just leave and walk to a neighbor's house. I won't stop. You. Really? Mia sounded suspicious. Really? You've had enough of people controlling you. I'm not going to be another person who does that. They drove in silence for a while. Then Emma asked, Do you have any stuffed animals? The Thompsons burned mine. Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. We have a whole closet full. My wife collects them. You can have anyone you want. Can I have more than one? You can have as many as you want, sweetheart. Emma started crying again, but this time it sounded different, less like grief and more like relief. When they pulled up to the house, Rachel was waiting on the porch. She was 42, with graying hair pulled into a ponytail and the kind of warm smile that made children instinctively trust her. She'd been a trauma therapist for 18 years. She'd seen everything. And right now, looking at these 3 damaged kids climbing out of her husband's truck, her heart broke and healed at the same time. Welcome home, she said simply. Who wants hot chocolate? 3 hands shot up, and for the first time in 7 months, Mia Rodriguez let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, not all adults were monsters, but the Thompsons weren't done fighting, and the real battle was just beginning. The first night at the Wilson house, none of the children slept. Emma and Lucas curled together in the guest room, whispering to each other every time they heard a sound. Mia sat on her bed fully clothed, her small backpack packed and ready by the door in case she needed to run. Rachel checked on them every hour, never pushing, just making sure they knew where she was. By morning, Jake had made the call that would change everything. Steele, I need the club, he'd said into his phone at 5:30 in the morning, standing in his garage so he wouldn't wake the kids. Not just our chapter, everyone. Marcus Steele. Rodriguez, president of the Iron Riders National Organization, had known Jake for 15 years. They'd served together in Afghanistan. When Steele heard the edge in Jake's voice, he didn't ask questions. What do you need? 3 kids pulled out of a foster care nightmare. The kind of nightmare that's been operating for 8 years across 4 states. The kind where authorities look the other way because the paperwork is perfect. Jake's voice was hard. They tried to kill two 6-year-old kids yesterday by locking them in a storage compartment in 100-degree heat. The parents are arrested, but they'll make bail. They always do. They have money and lawyers, and they know how to work the system. How much money? Over $400,000 in foster care payments. Probably more we haven't found yet. Steele was quiet for a moment. Give me 3 hours. Where do you need us? Amarillo County Courthouse. The Thompsons have a bail hearing at 10:00 hours. I want them to see what they're up against. By 8:30 that morning, the rumble started. Rachel was making breakfast, teaching Emma how to crack eggs when she felt the vibrations through the floor. She walked to the front window, and her coffee mug nearly slipped from her hand. Motorcycles, dozens of them, rolling down their quiet suburban street in perfect formation. Jake stepped out onto the porch. Steele pulled up first, killing his engine and removing his helmet. Behind him, the Amarillo chapter. Then riders from Lubbock, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, and Houston. They kept coming. Cruisers, choppers, touring bikes, each one carrying a man or woman in leather with the Iron Riders patch on their back. You called in the cavalry, Rachel said, coming to stand beside her husband. I called in the family. Mia appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. What's happening? Those are Iron Riders, Jake said. They're here because we don't let people hurt kids, and we don't let those people walk away. Steele climbed the porch steps. He was 55 years old, built like a tank, with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too much war. He looked at Mia for a long moment, then crouched down to her level. You're the girl who saved those twins, he said. It wasn't a question. Mia nodded. That took guts, running to strangers for help when every adult in your life had failed you. Steele stood up. We're going to make sure those people never hurt another kid. You have my word. By 9:45, 78 motorcycles were parked in formation outside the Amarillo County Courthouse. The riders stood in silent ranks on the courthouse steps, veterans, teachers, construction workers, nurses, business owners, all wearing their leather cuts, all wearing the same expression of controlled fury. The local news had gotten wind of it. 3 camera crews set up across the street. A reporter named Jennifer Martinez approached Steele. Sir, can you tell us why the Iron Riders are here today? Steele looked directly into the camera. We're here because Brian and Kelsey Thompson spent 8 years exploiting vulnerable children for profit. They collected over $400,000 in foster care payments while systematically abusing at least 17 children across 4 states. Yesterday, they locked 2 6-year-old kids in a storage compartment in 100-degree heat as punishment. Those kids almost died. Jennifer's eyes widened. Are these allegations substantiated? The kids are in the hospital with heat exhaustion. The Thompsons are under arrest. The evidence speaks for itself. Steele's voice carried across the courthouse steps. But here's what really matters. This isn't the first time they've done this. They've been moving state to state, changing locations every time someone got suspicious. The system failed these kids over and over because the Thompsons knew how to game it. We're here to make sure that ends today. Inside the courthouse, Brian and Kelsey Thompson sat with their lawyer, a slick-looking man named Richard Brenner, who specialized in defending difficult cases. He'd assured them they'd be out on bail within an hour. The evidence is circumstantial, Brenner said confidently. Heat exhaustion could be explained as an accident. The bruises could be from the children's previous placements. And Mia's testimony won't hold up. She's a troubled kid with a history of lying. What about the security footage? Kelsey asked nervously. Shows you entering a building and a girl running to some bikers. Doesn't prove you locked the kids in the compartment. Brenner smiled. Trust me, I've handled worse. Then they heard it. The rumble of engines. The sound grew louder, filling the courthouse with a deep vibration that made the windows rattle. Brian looked out and his face went pale. What the hell? Brenner walked to the window and froze. Those are bikers. I can see that. Why are there so many? Through the window they watched as news crews interviewed riders, watched as more motorcycles pulled up, watched as the crowd grew from 78 to over 100 as riders from New Mexico and Oklahoma arrived. A bailiff entered their holding room. Your hearing is in 5 minutes. They were led into the courtroom. Judge Patricia Murphy presided, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for being tough on child abuse cases. The courtroom gallery was packed with Iron Riders, every seat filled, more standing in the back. The presence was overwhelming. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Murphy took her seat and immediately noticed the packed gallery. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she said nothing. She'd seen protest before. This was different. This was quiet, controlled, somehow more intimidating than if they'd been shouting. "We're here for the bail hearing of Brian and Kelsey Thompson," the judge began. "Mr. Brenner, you're representing the defendants?" "Yes, Your Honor. We're requesting bail be set at a reasonable amount. My clients have strong ties to the community, no prior criminal record, and pose no flight risk." "They have ties to 5 communities across 4 states," a voice said from the prosecution table. Assistant District Attorney Carmen Rodriguez stood up. She was young, barely 30, but she had a reputation for being ruthless on child welfare cases. "Your Honor, the state requests bail be denied. These defendants have a pattern of moving whenever authorities get close. They're currently under investigation in 4 states, and I have something the court needs to see." She pulled out a laptop and connected it to the courtroom's display system. "Last night, our financial crimes unit executed a search warrant on the defendant's RV. We found records of 17 foster care placements over 8 years. We also found something else." The screen filled with a spreadsheet, columns of numbers, dates, names, payment amounts. The defendants kept meticulous records of every payment they received from foster care agencies, over $412,000 in 8 years. They also kept records of their expenses for the children. Carmen's voice hardened. "Those expenses averaged $800 per month for 3 children. That's $267 per child. The federal foster care payment is approximately $1,600 per child per month." The math was damning. They were collecting nearly $5,000 monthly for 3 kids and spending less than $800. "Where did the rest go?" Judge Murphy asked. "Offshore accounts, the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Jersey." Carmen pulled up more documents. They were systematically stealing from the foster care system, but more importantly, they were stealing from the children. Federal law requires foster parents to use those funds for the children's care, food, clothing, education, medical needs. The Thompsons were pocketing the majority and providing bare minimum care. Brian was on his feet. "That's not true. We gave those kids everything." "Sit down, Mr. Thompson," Judge Murphy said coldly. Carmen wasn't finished. "Your Honor, there's more. During our investigation, we contacted Child Protective Services in every state where the defendants fostered children. We found a pattern. Every placement ended with the child being removed for behavioral problems. Every single one. 16 children, all removed, all documented as troubled, aggressive, or unmanageable." She pulled up another document. "We contacted 12 of those children. They're teenagers and adults now. Every single one tells the same story. Abuse, neglect, being locked in rooms or storage areas as punishment, being denied food, being told they were worthless, and when they tried to report it, they were labeled as liars with behavioral problems." The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of someone crying. One of the bikers in the gallery had his head down, shoulders shaking. Steele put a hand on his shoulder. "There's one more thing," Carmen said quietly. "One of the 17 children the Thompsons fostered was a 14-year-old girl named Maya Foster. She ran away from their custody 3 years ago in Oklahoma. She was never found." The implication hung in the air like poison. "We're requesting the FBI open an investigation into Maya Foster's disappearance," Carmen continued. "The circumstances are suspicious. A child with no money, no resources, no support system vanishes without a trace? And the Thompsons simply shrugged and moved on to the next state?" Brenner was sweating now. "Your Honor, this is speculation. There's no evidence of foul play." "There's no evidence because nobody looked," Carmen shot back, "because everyone believed the Thompsons when they said Maya was troubled, just like they believed them about every other child." Judge Murphy reviewed the documents in front of her. When she looked up, her expression was carved from granite. "Bail is denied. The defendants will remain in custody pending trial. Furthermore, I'm ordering a complete investigation into all 17 foster care placements with full cooperation from relevant state agencies." She looked directly at Brian and Kelsey. "You're also being charged with fraud, child endangerment, and child abuse. The FBI will be contacted regarding Maya Foster." Brian exploded. This is insane. We're victims here. That biker gang has orchestrated this whole thing. They're manipulating everyone. Steele stood up in the gallery. His voice was calm, but it carried through the courtroom like thunder. Your Honor, if I may speak. Judge Murphy looked surprised but nodded. You are. Marcus Rodriguez, president of the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club, national organization. Steele stepped forward to the gallery rail. We're not a gang. We're a veterans organization and charity group. 70% of our members are veterans. We're teachers, nurses, construction workers, business owners. We're also fathers and mothers. And we're here because one of our members, Jake Wilson, saved 3 children from dying in that RV. He gestured to Jake, who stood in the back row. Jake is a decorated Marine. He's a licensed emergency foster parent. He and his wife currently have temporary custody of all 3 children, approved by Child Protective Services. We're not manipulating anything. We're making sure these children's voices are finally heard. Judge Murphy studied Steele for a long moment. Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate your organization's concern, but I need to know this won't become a vigilante situation. We're not vigilantes, Your Honor. We're witnesses. We're advocates. And we're going to be at every hearing, every court date, every proceeding until justice is served. Not because we want revenge, because we want to make sure the system doesn't fail these kids again. The judge nodded slowly. Then I suggest you prepare for a long haul. This case is going to trial. As Brian and Kelsey were led out in handcuffs, Brian turned to look at the gallery of bikers. His face was twisted with hatred and fear. This isn't over, he hissed at Jake. You're right, Jake said quietly. It's just beginning. Outside the courthouse, the news crews swarmed. Steele gave interviews. Other writers shared their own stories of foster care, of being failed by the system, of knowing what it felt like to be a kid nobody believed. Patricia Harris, the social worker, approached Jake on the courthouse steps. The Thompsons' lawyer's going to fight this hard. They'll claim the kids are lying, that the evidence is circumstantial, that they're being railroaded. Let them fight, Jake said. We've got something they don't. What's that? The truth, and about 150 bikers who are willing to show up every single day to make sure people hear it. Tommy walked up with his phone out. Boss, you need to see this. The story's going viral. Justice for Maya is trending nationally. People are sharing stories about foster care abuse. There's already a petition demanding investigation into all the Thompsons' foster placements, 20,000 signatures in 2 hours. Jake looked at the sea of motorcycles, at the news cameras, at the growing crowd of supporters who'd heard the story and come to show solidarity. This was bigger than 3 kids now. This was about every child who'd ever been failed by a system that was supposed to protect them. His phone rang. It was Rachel. The kids saw the news, she said. Mia's asking if this is real, if people actually care. Tell her yes, Jake said. Tell her the world is watching now, and we're not looking away. Back at the Wilson house, Mia stood in the living room watching the news coverage with Emma and Lucas pressed against her sides. On the screen, bikers filled the courthouse steps. Reporters talked about abuse and justice and children who'd been silenced for too long. Are those people really here for us? Emma whispered. Mia thought about the rest stop, about running toward those scary-looking bikers because she'd run out of options, about Jake cutting that lock and pulling Emma and Lucas from that oven-hot compartment, about Steele promising they'd make sure the Thompsons never hurt another kid. Yeah, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. They really are. Lucas looked up at her with his 6-year-old wisdom. Does this mean we're safe now? Rachel, who'd been standing in the doorway listening, walked over and knelt beside them. Sweetie, I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen again. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise this. You're not alone anymore. You've got Jake and me, you've got the Iron Riders, and you've got each other. That's a pretty good start. Emma crawled into Rachel's lap. It was the first time she'd voluntarily touched any adult since being freed from that compartment. I like it here, she said softly. Can we stay? Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. As long as you need to, as long as you want to. This is your home now. Outside, Jake pulled up on his Harley. Behind him, Steele and Tommy rode escort. The three men walked into the house to find four people curled on the couch, watching news coverage of their own story. "How'd it go?" Rachel asked. "Bail denied. They're staying locked up, and the investigation just got bigger." Jake sat down on the floor in front of the couch, looking at the three kids who'd crashed into his life less than 24 hours ago. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us. Court dates, testimonies, media attention. It's going to be hard. Are you three up for it?" Mia looked at her foster siblings, then at Jake and Rachel, then at Steele standing in the doorway like a leather-clad guardian angel. For the first time in 7 months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. "We're up for it," she said, "but we're not doing it alone this time." "No," Jake agreed. "You're definitely not alone." And outside, 78 motorcycles sat waiting. Because the Iron Riders had learned something over the years. Sometimes justice needed a push, sometimes the system needed witnesses, and sometimes kids needed to see that the scariest-looking people could be the safest ones to trust. The war wasn't over, but they'd won the first battle, and they weren't going anywhere. The trial began on a cold January morning, 6 months after that scorching July day at the rest stop. The Amarillo County Courthouse had never seen anything like it. Every morning, without fail, motorcycles lined the street. Every morning, at least 10 Iron Riders filed into the courtroom gallery, sometimes 15, sometimes 20. They rotated shifts, coordinated through group chats, making sure the Thompsons never looked out at an empty courtroom. Jake sat in the front row every single day. He'd arranged his construction business schedule around it. Rachel came when she could, between therapy sessions. Steele made the drive from Dallas 3 times a week. Tommy never missed a day. Assistant District Attorney Carmen Rodriguez had spent those 6 months building an ironclad case. She had medical records from 4 states, financial documents showing the systematic theft, statements from 12 former foster children, now teenagers and adults, who'd finally found the courage to speak. And she had something else. She had Patricia "Doc" Williams. Doc was 72 years old, a retired social worker who'd spent 45 years in the child welfare system before joining the Iron Riders after her husband died. She'd seen everything, and when Carmen asked her to serve as an expert witness, Doc had agreed immediately. "The Thompsons represent a particular type of predator," Doc testified on day 3 of the trial. She sat in the witness box with perfect posture, her gray hair pulled back, wearing a professional blazer over her Iron Riders t-shirt. "They're not the chaotic abusers who leave obvious evidence. They're methodical. They understand the system intimately and they exploit its weaknesses." Richard Brenner, the defense attorney, stood to cross-examine. "Ms. Williams, isn't it true you're a member of the same motorcycle club as Mr. Wilson, the man who currently has custody of the alleged victims?" "It's Dr. Williams, actually. I have a doctorate in social work. And yes, I'm an Iron Rider. I'm also someone who spent 4 decades trying to protect children like Mia, Emma, and Lucas from people like your clients." "So you're biased." "I'm informed. There's a difference." Carmen stood. "Your Honor, Dr. Williams has reviewed over 2,000 pages of documentation, medical records, CPS reports, financial statements, testimony from 16 other children. Her analysis is based on evidence, not bias." Judge Murphy nodded. "Continue, Dr. Williams." Doc turned to the jury. "The pattern is clear. The Thompsons would take in children, usually siblings or harder-to-place kids who came with higher monthly payments. They'd maintain perfect appearances for the first 3 to 6 months during the standard oversight period. Clean home, well-fed children, proper medical care. Then, once social worker visits decreased, the abuse would begin." She pulled up a chart on the courtroom display. "Look at the timeline. Every child placement lasted between 7 and 14 months. That's significant. It's long enough to collect substantial payments, but short enough that the children don't age into support systems like school counselors or trusted teachers. And every placement ended the same way. The child was removed for behavioral problems, the Thompsons collected a final payment, and they'd move to a new state within 3 months." "That's not abuse, that's geography," Brenner argued. "That's calculated predation," Doc shot back. They moved every time someone got suspicious. Arkansas to Oklahoma to New Mexico to Arizona to Texas, always staying just ahead of investigation. That's not coincidence, that's strategy. The prosecution called witnesses one by one. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the emergency room physician who'd treated Emma and Lucas, testified about the severity of their heat exhaustion. Those children were 15 to 20 minutes from organ failure, Dr. Martinez said, her voice steady, but her hands clenched in her lap. The compartment temperature was estimated at 132 degrees. They'd been locked in there for approximately 90 minutes. Any longer, and we'd be talking about permanent brain damage or death. Could it have been an accident? Brenner asked. The compartment was padlocked from the outside. Children cannot lock themselves in from the outside. Dr. Martinez looked directly at the jury. This wasn't an accident. This was punishment that nearly became murder. Former foster children testified via video conference. A 17-year-old boy named Marcus Thompson, no relation, who'd been placed with them 4 years earlier. They locked me in a closet for 8 hours because I broke a dish, Marcus said, his voice flat with remembered trauma. No food, no water, no bathroom. When I told my social worker, the Thompsons showed her the closet. It was full of cleaning supplies, no room for a person. They had reorganized it after letting me out. They called me a liar. I was moved to another home 2 weeks later for behavioral problems I didn't have. A 19-year-old woman named Jessica Rodriguez testified about being denied meals as punishment, about wearing the same clothes until they fell apart, about watching the Thompsons buy expensive things for themselves while telling the kids there was no money for basics. They had a brand new RV that cost almost $200,000, Jessica said, her voice shaking with anger. But they told us we couldn't have new shoes because money was tight. I wore shoes with holes in them for 6 months. My feet got infected. When the school nurse called CPS, the Thompsons bought me new shoes before the social worker arrived and said I'd destroyed the old ones on purpose. Each testimony built on the last, creating a portrait of systematic abuse so detailed that several jury members were visibly crying. But the defense had its own strategy. Brenner called a parade of character witnesses, fellow church members who swore the Thompsons were devoted Christians, former neighbors who remembered them as friendly and normal, a child psychologist who'd never met the children but testified that foster kids often made false accusations due to trauma bonding and attachment disorders. Mia Rodriguez has been in foster care since age 9, the psychologist said. She's experienced significant trauma. It's not uncommon for such children to create false narratives as a coping mechanism. Carmen's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Patterson, have you interviewed Mia? No. Have you reviewed her medical records? No. Have you spoken with her therapists? No. So your testimony is based on generalized statistics rather than this specific case. I'm speaking to patterns common in foster children with trauma histories. Patterns, Carmen repeated. Let me show you another pattern. She pulled up medical records on the screen. This is Mia's medical history from before her placement with the Thompsons. 3 years, 3 different foster homes, 0 reports of behavioral problems, 0 accusations of abuse, 0 issues with lying or manipulation. Then she's placed with the Thompsons and suddenly she's making up stories? Dr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. Trauma can manifest differently in different environments. Or maybe she's telling the truth and you're helping abusers discredit their victims. Objection! Brenner was on his feet. Sustained, Judge Murphy said. Ms. Rodriguez, rephrase. No further questions, Carmen said, walking back to her table. The prosecution's trump card came on day 18. Carmen called Special Agent Lisa Thompson from the FBI's Crimes Against Children Unit. The courtroom went silent. Agent Thompson, can you tell the court about your investigation into Maya Foster? Maya Foster was 14 years old when she was placed with Brian and Kelsey Thompson in Oklahoma. She'd been in foster care for 2 years following her mother's incarceration. By all accounts, she was a sweet kid. Good grades, no behavioral issues. She was with the Thompsons for 11 months. Agent Thompson pulled up a photo. Maya was small for 14, with red hair and freckles, smiling at the camera. Several jury members looked away. Maya ran away on September 12th. The Thompsons reported it 3 days later. Local police conducted a cursory search but assumed she was a runaway. The case went cold. Agent Thompson's voice hardened. Last month, following a tip from the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club, we reopened the investigation. We searched the Thompsons' former property in Oklahoma. The new owners had never met the Thompsons. They'd bought the property through a real estate company. The courtroom held its breath. We found Maya Foster buried in the woods behind the property. She'd been dead for approximately 3 years. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The courtroom erupted. Brian Thompson lunged to his feet, screaming, "That's a lie! We don't know anything about that." Kelsey was sobbing, shaking her head violently. Judge Murphy's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order! Bailiffs, restrain Mr. Thompson." It took 4 bailiffs to get Brian back in his seat. The jury looked shell-shocked. Half the Iron Riders in the gallery had tears streaming down their faces. Agent Thompson continued, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We found the Thompsons' DNA at the burial site. Soil samples match soil found on clothing items recovered from their RV. We also found Maya's diary hidden in a locked box in the RV's storage compartment." She held up an evidence bag containing a small notebook. Maya documented systematic abuse, beatings, starvation, being locked in a storage shed in winter. On the last entry, dated September 11th, the day before she disappeared, Maya wrote that she was going to run away and tell police everything. She wrote that Brian had threatened to kill her if she ever told anyone. The notebook was entered into evidence. Carmen read excerpts aloud. Maya's words, written in her teenage handwriting, described a nightmare that made the jury physically recoil. "They say I'm not worth the money they get for me. Mrs. Thompson hit me with a belt today because I couldn't solve a math problem. Mr. Thompson says if I tell anyone, no one will believe me because I'm just foster trash. He says foster kids disappear all the time and nobody cares." Carmen's voice broke on the last line. She took a moment to compose herself. "Your Honor, the state is adding murder charges to the indictment. Maya Foster was a 14-year-old girl whose only crime was being vulnerable. The Thompsons killed her to keep her quiet, and they would have done the same to Mia, Emma, and Lucas if they'd been given the chance." The defense tried to recover. Brenner argued the FBI evidence was circumstantial, that other people could have accessed the property, that Maya could have run away and been killed by someone else. But the DNA evidence was solid. The diary entries matched the abuse patterns from every other testimony. And when confronted with the question of how Maya's body ended up buried on property they'd owned, the Thompsons had no answer. On day 23, Mia took the stand. She was 13 now, 6 months older and stronger than the terrified 12-year-old who'd run to Jake at that rest stop. Rachel had worked with her in therapy, preparing her for this moment. Jake sat in the front row, a steady presence. Carmen's questioning was gentle. "Mia, can you tell the jury why you ran to those bikers that day?" Mia's voice was quiet, but clear. "Because I knew Emma and Lucas were dying. I'd tried everything else. I'd called hotlines. I'd told social workers. I'd told teachers. Nobody believed me. The Thompsons always had perfect explanations, and I was just a foster kid with problems." She looked at the jury. "But that day, I saw those bikers and I thought maybe someone who wasn't part of the system would actually listen." "Were you scared of them?" "Terrified. They looked really scary. Big leather jackets, tattoos, motorcycles. But I was more scared of what would happen if I didn't ask for help. Emma and Lucas were in that compartment. It was so hot. I could hear Lucas crying, but I couldn't get them out, and the Thompsons were going to come back any minute, and I just ran." "What happened when you reached Jake Wilson?" "He believed me." Mia's voice broke. "He didn't ask a million questions. He didn't tell me I was making things up. He just said, 'I believe you.' And then he helped. Nobody had ever done that before." Brenner's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to paint Mia as manipulative, as someone who'd orchestrated the whole situation for attention. He brought up her previous foster home placements, suggesting she had a pattern of causing problems. Mia sat up straighter. "I've been in 6 foster homes since I was 9. 5 of them were good. The people were nice. I had friends. I went to school. I was normal. Then I got placed with the Thompsons, and suddenly I'm a problem child. That doesn't make sense unless the problem isn't me. The problem is them." Or perhaps you're simply difficult to place long term. I'm difficult to place because I told the truth about the Thompsons and got labeled a liar. That's not my fault. That's the system's fault for believing them instead of me. By the time Mia stepped down, even Brenner looked shaken. The trial lasted 32 days. Every day, Iron Riders filled the gallery. Every day, they took notes, recorded public proceedings, and posted updates online. The hashtag #ShareJusticeForMaya had over 2 million tweets. News coverage was constant. Politicians started calling for foster care reform. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood with the verdict sheet in trembling hands. On the count of murder in the first degree in the death of Maya Foster, we find the defendant Brian Thompson guilty. Kelsey let out a wail. Brian sat stone-faced. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant Kelsey Thompson guilty. Count after count, child abuse, endangerment, fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, 23 counts total, guilty on every single one. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Murphy had reviewed everything: victim impact statements, psychological evaluations, arguments from both sides. "I've been a judge for 28 years, she began. "I've seen terrible things, but rarely have I seen evil that hid itself so successfully for so long. The defendants systematically abused vulnerable children for profit. They stole from the state, they stole from the children, and they stole the life of Maya Foster to cover their crimes." She looked at Brian and Kelsey with open disgust. "Brian Thompson, you are sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole for the murder of Maya Foster. Additionally, 15 years consecutive for child abuse charges, 10 years concurrent for fraud charges. Kelsey Thompson, same sentence. You will both also pay full restitution of all foster care payments received, totaling $412,000, plus punitive damages to each child you harmed." The gavel fell. The Thompsons were led away in chains, and in the gallery, 78 Iron Riders stood as one, a silent tribute to justice finally served. Outside the courthouse, Mia stood between Jake and Rachel, surrounded by bikers. News cameras pressed close. "How do you feel?" a reporter asked. Mia thought about it. "I feel like someone finally listened. I feel like Maya got justice, and I feel like maybe other kids won't have to go through what we did." Because that was the real victory. The trial had sparked a firestorm of reform. Texas overhauled its foster care oversight system. 3 other states followed. The Iron Riders established a national foster care watchdog program, training members to spot warning signs and work with authorities. Maya Foster's body was released to her biological grandmother for burial. 200 Iron Riders attended her funeral, giving a 14-year-old girl who died alone the send-off she deserved. And in an Amarillo courtroom, justice had finally arrived, carried on the backs of motorcycles and powered by people who refused to look away. The day after the sentencing, Jake and Rachel sat in their living room with Mia, Emma, and Lucas. The trial was over. The Thompsons were in prison for life. But now came the harder question. What happened next? "We love having you here," Rachel said gently. "But the emergency placement was only meant to be temporary. Now we need to figure out what's best for you 3 long term." Emma, now 7 years old, immediately started crying. "You don't want us anymore?" "That's not what I said, sweetie." Rachel pulled Emma into her lap. "I'm saying we need to make a plan. A real plan. Jake and I aren't licensed for long-term foster care. We'd need to go through more training, more home studies. And you 3 deserve stability, not more uncertainty." "We could split them up," Patricia Harris, the social worker, had suggested earlier that week. "It would be easier to place them separately. 3 kids together is a tough sell." Jake had nearly thrown her out of his house. "These kids have lost everything. You're not taking away each other." Now, sitting with the kids, he made a decision. "We're not splitting you up. That's non-negotiable. So, here's what's going to happen. Rachel and I are going to complete the long-term licensing. It'll take about 3 months. In the meantime, we're going to find you a foster family who can take all 3 of you, someone good, someone we trust. And if at any point you want to come back here, if the placement doesn't work, you come back. Our door is always open." "How do we know the next family won't be like the Thompsons?" Lucas asked. He was 7 now, still small for his age, still having nightmares about storage compartments and locked doors. Because we're going to make sure of it, Jake said. The Iron Riders are going to vet whoever takes you. Background checks, interviews, surprise visits. You'll have a whole motorcycle club watching your back. Steele had already put the word out through the Iron Riders network. They needed a foster family in the Amarillo area, someone who could take 3 kids, someone with experience with trauma, someone the club could verify and trust. The call came from an unexpected source. "My name is Margaret Foster," the woman said when Jake answered his phone. "I'm calling about the Rodriguez children." Jake had learned to be suspicious of anyone who called about the kids. The trial had made them famous. Opportunists had crawled out of the woodwork. "How did you get my number?" "From Doc Williams. She and I worked together at Child Protective Services 30 years ago. She vouched for me, but said you'd want to verify everything yourself, which is smart." Margaret's voice was warm, confident. "I'm 68 years old, retired schoolteacher. My husband David is 71, retired Army. We fostered 6 children over 20 years before David's heart attack forced us to stop. That was 5 years ago. David's healthy now, and we've been talking about fostering again." When Doc told me about 3 siblings who needed placement together, well, I told David it sounded like a sign. Jake ran every check he could think of. Criminal background, financial records, references from former foster children who'd stayed with the Fosters. Every single one came back glowing. "Margaret and David saved my life," said a 26-year-old woman named Jennifer who'd been fostered by them from ages 14 to 18. "I was angry, violent, completely out of control when they took me in. They never gave up on me. They set boundaries, but they also gave me love. Real love, not transactional foster care love. I still have dinner with them every Sunday." Steele personally drove to the Fosters' home for an unannounced inspection. He called Jake 2 hours later. "It's perfect. Big backyard, 3 bedrooms ready, 1 for Mia and 1 each for the twins. Margaret's got a library that would make a school jealous. David's got a wood shop in the garage where he builds furniture. The house smells like cookies, and there's photos everywhere of their former foster kids. These are good people, Jake." 2 weeks later, Mia, Emma, and Lucas met the Fosters at a neutral location, a park where everyone could be casual and the kids didn't feel trapped. Margaret was short and round with white hair and laugh lines around her eyes. David was tall and lean with a military bearing softened by kindness. "I'm not going to lie to you," Margaret said, sitting on a park bench with all 3 kids. "Foster care is hard. You've been through hell. Trust is going to take time. But here's what I can promise. In our house, you're safe. No locked doors except bathrooms for privacy. No punishment by withholding food or isolation. No yelling. No hitting. No making you feel worthless. You make mistakes. We talk about them. You break rules. There are consequences, but fair ones. And most importantly, you're allowed to be kids. Messy, loud, imperfect kids." "What if we don't like it?" Mia asked, her arms crossed defensively. "Then you tell Jake and Rachel, and we figure something else out. Nobody's trapping you anywhere. You have choices now, maybe for the first time in a long time." Emma walked up to David shyly. "Are you nice?" David crouched down to her level. "I try to be. I mess up sometimes. I get grumpy when I'm hungry and I tell terrible jokes. But I promise I'll never hurt you. I was in the Army for 30 years. I saw a lot of bad things. Came home and decided I wanted to spend the rest of my life making sure kids had good things. That's why Margaret and I foster." "Do you have a dog?" Lucas asked. 2, a golden retriever named Daisy and a mutt named Biscuit who thinks he's a lapdog even though he weighs 80 pounds. Lucas's eyes lit up. It was the first time Jake had seen him look genuinely excited. The transition took 3 weeks. Slow visits that gradually got longer. Overnight stays that turned into weekends. The kids kept their bags packed at first, ready to run. But gradually, slowly, they started to relax. Jake and Rachel visited twice a week. The Iron Riders did surprise wellness checks, showing up unannounced to make sure everything was legitimate. Every single time, they found happy kids and patient adults. Mia's doing her homework at the kitchen table, and Margaret's teaching her to bake bread, Tommy reported after one visit. The twins are in the backyard playing with the dogs. David built them a treehouse. It's the most normal, boring, perfect thing I've ever seen. But Jake and Rachel weren't done. Neither were the Iron Riders. Steele called a national club meeting. Representatives from 42 chapters across 23 states gathered in Dallas. The topic: making sure what happened to Mia, Emma, Lucas, and Maya never happened again. "We need a formal program," Steele said. "Not just us showing up when things go wrong. We need to be proactive. We need to work with the system, not against it." Doc Williams stepped forward. "I've been developing a training program. It teaches our members to recognize signs of abuse, how to properly report concerns, how to work with social workers and law enforcement. We're not vigilantes. We're advocates, but we need structure." Over the next 6 months, the Iron Riders established the Maya Foster Child Advocacy Program. They partnered with Child Protective Services in 8 states, creating a system where vetted club members could serve as volunteer advocates for foster children. They established a hotline for kids who needed help. They funded a scholarship program for kids aging out of foster care. The first fundraiser was a charity ride from Amarillo to Oklahoma City, ending at Maya Foster's grave. 500 riders participated. They raised $87,000 in one day. Jake earmarked $67,000 of it for Mia, Emma, and Lucas's education. The rest went to the General Advocacy Fund. "These kids are going to college," Jake announced at the ride's end. "All 3 of them. Full rides, no matter what. Maya didn't get that chance. But we're making sure other kids do." Mia was there when he made the announcement. She was 13 now, taller, healthier, finally looking like a normal teenager instead of a trauma survivor. She stepped up to the microphone, her voice shaking but determined. "I want to say thank you. To Jake and Rachel for believing me when nobody else would. To the Iron Riders for showing up every single day. To Margaret and David for giving us a real home. And to everyone here who's helping make sure other kids don't go through what we did." She paused, gathering courage. "But I also want to say something else. Maya Foster deserved better. She deserved someone to believe her. She deserved someone to save her. We can't bring her back, but we can make sure her death meant something. We can make sure the system changes. We can make sure other kids find their voice." The crowd of 500 bikers erupted in applause. Grown men and women, covered in leather and tattoos, wiping tears from their faces. Rachel enrolled in additional training to become a court-appointed special advocate, a CASA volunteer who represents children in legal proceedings. She took on 5 cases in the first year, using everything she'd learned from Mia's situation to fight for other kids. Jake became a licensed foster parent trainer, teaching other potential foster families about trauma-informed care. He spoke at conferences, sharing Mia's story with permission, explaining how the system had failed and how it could be fixed. The kids thrived. Emma started 3rd grade and joined the school choir. Her teacher called Margaret after the first concert, crying because Emma's solo was so beautiful. Lucas conquered his fear of the dark with David's help. They started a nightly routine of reading together before bed, sitting in Lucas's room with the nightlight on, gradually decreasing the light over months until Lucas could sleep with just the glow from the hallway. Mia struggled the most. 13-year-old girls are difficult in the best circumstances. 13-year-old girls with profound trauma are nearly impossible. She fought with Margaret, tested boundaries, pushed to see if she'd be abandoned again. Margaret never wavered. "You can be angry at me, you can yell, you can slam doors, but I'm not leaving and neither are you. This is your home. You're stuck with us." Slowly, over months and then a year, Mia started to believe it. She joined the school debate team. She got a part-time job at a local bookstore. She made friends who didn't know her as the foster kid from the news, just as Mia. 2 years after that July day at the rest stop, Margaret and David filed adoption papers for all 3 children. The court date was set for a Tuesday morning in March. The courtroom was packed, not just with Iron Riders, though 75 of them showed up, but with teachers, neighbors, friends, and people who'd followed the story and wanted to see the ending. Judge Murphy, the same judge who'd presided over the Thompson trial, smiled when she saw the crowd. "This is more like it," she said. "This is what this courtroom should be used for, building families, not destroying them." The proceedings were simple. Margaret and David testified about their love for the children. Mia, Emma, and Lucas each spoke about wanting to be adopted, about feeling safe and loved for the first time in years. When Judge Murphy signed the final papers, making them legally Mia Foster, Emma Foster, and Lucas Foster, the courtroom erupted in cheers. But the most important moment came after, when everyone gathered at the Foster's house for a celebration. Mia pulled Jake aside, away from the crowd. "I need to tell you something," she said. Jake prepared himself for bad news. Therapy had taught him that trauma survivors often spiraled during happy moments, afraid to trust good things. But Mia was smiling. "I've been working with Doc Williams on the advocacy program. We're developing a peer support system where former foster kids like me can help current foster kids who are going through abuse. Doc says I'm really good at it, that I have a gift for making people feel heard." "That's because you know what it feels like not to be heard," Jake said quietly. "Exactly. And I never want another kid to feel that way." Mia looked back at the party, at Emma and Lucas playing with their new cousins, the children of other former foster kids Margaret and David had raised. "You saved my life that day at the rest stop. I ran to you because I was desperate and you were the only option left. But you didn't just save us from the Thompsons. You gave us a future. You saved yourself, kid. You were brave enough to run, brave enough to speak up, brave enough to keep fighting when everyone told you to shut up. All I did was listen." "No," Mia said firmly. "You did more than listen. You acted. You didn't let them dismiss me as a troubled kid. You didn't let the system fail us again. You brought in an entire motorcycle club to make sure we mattered. That's not nothing. That's everything." She hugged him then. This 13-year-old girl who'd been so broken 2 years ago, now strong and whole and fighting for others. Inside the house, Rachel was teaching Emma to frost cupcakes. David was showing Lucas how to use a level in the woodshop. Margaret was telling embarrassing stories about their former foster kids to Steele and Doc, everyone laughing. Tommy walked over to Jake. "You did good, brother." "We did good," Jake corrected. "All of us. The club, the system, the people who refused to give up." "Maya didn't get this ending," Tommy said quietly. "No, but maybe her death wasn't meaningless. Maybe it changed enough that other kids will." The Maya Foster Child Advocacy Program expanded to 18 states in its first 2 years. The Iron Riders trained over 300 members as certified advocates. They helped 742 children navigate the foster care system. They helped prosecute 23 abusive foster parents. They changed laws in 6 states, increasing oversight and decreasing the bureaucracy that let predators slip through. Mia became the program's youth ambassador. At 14, she spoke at state legislatures, sharing her story, demanding change. She was poised and articulate and absolutely fearless. "I was 12 years old when I ran to a group of scary-looking bikers because I'd run out of options," she told the Texas State Senate Committee on Family Services. "That shouldn't have to happen. Children shouldn't have to be desperate before they're heard. The system is supposed to protect us. But it failed me. It failed Emma and Lucas. And it failed Maya Foster. We're here to make sure it doesn't fail anyone else." The senator chairing the committee had tears in his eyes. "Young lady, you're going to change the world." "I'm going to try," Mia said, with a lot of help from some bikers with really big hearts. On the 3rd anniversary of the Rest Stop rescue, the Iron Riders held a memorial ride for Maya Foster. They rode from Amarillo to the Oklahoma town where she died, laying flowers at her grave. 300 riders. Mia rode on the back of Jake's bike, holding a photo of Maya that they'd found in her diary. At the grave, Mia spoke. "I never met you, Maya, but I know you. I know what you went through because I went through it too. The difference is, someone believed me, someone saved me. You deserved that same chance. I'm sorry you didn't get it, but I promise, we're making sure your death meant something. We're making sure other kids get saved. Rest easy, Maya. We've got it from here." As the sun set over the Oklahoma plains, 300 engines roared to life, a tribute, a promise, a declaration that some people refuse to look away when children suffer. Emma and Lucas Foster grew up safe and loved. Emma became a music teacher. Lucas became a therapist specializing in childhood trauma. Both of them volunteered with the advocacy program, giving back what had been given to them. Mia Foster graduated high school with honors. She got a full scholarship to university, funded partially by the Iron Riders program and partially by academic merit. She studied social work and public policy. At her graduation, 78 bikers showed up in full leather to cheer as she walked across the stage. "We're so proud of you, kid," Jake said afterward. "I wouldn't be here without you," Mia said. "Any of you." But that wasn't quite true. Mia had always had the strength. She'd proven it that July day when she ran toward strangers because she refused to watch children die. All the bikers had done was give her the platform to use that strength. Years later, when Mia was 25 and working as a state child welfare administrator, she kept a photo on her desk. It showed her at 12 years old, standing between Jake and Steele at the courthouse the day the Thompsons were sentenced. She looked tiny between these two massive bikers, but she also looked safe. Visitors would ask about it. "Who are they?" "My family," Mia would say. "The people who taught me that sometimes the scariest-looking people have the biggest hearts, and that when the system fails, ordinary people can choose to be extraordinary." The Iron Riders never stopped riding. They never stopped showing up for kids who needed help. They never stopped proving that loyalty and justice could be carried on motorcycles, powered by people who refused to accept that children were disposable. And somewhere, maybe, Mia Foster rested a little easier, knowing her death had sparked a movement, that her voice, silenced at 14, had become a chorus that couldn't be ignored. The system wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was better. And kids like Mia, Emma, and Lucas had futures instead of just survival. That was restoration. That was justice. That was the sound of 78 motorcycles saying, "You matter, you're worth fighting for, and we're not going anywhere."